This video is sponsored by Skillshare.
Wait, you didn't kill yourself because the Knicks were having a good season? What would you have done if they were having a bad season?
I don't know. Gotten into baseball?
Luck is the residue of design. This quote is widely attributed to Baseball Hall of Famer Wesley Branch Rickey, and is a brilliantly concise way of stating that the more thought out and carefully built up something is, the more likely good things will occur that the builders never purposefully intended. Keep this quote filed away in the back of your head, because it will become very important later on. Until then, let's give some attention to the design of the final 2 episodes of Bojack Horseman, and how they can be used as examples for all you writers out there looking to finish your own stories. Now, this can probably go without saying, but writing endings is one of the most difficult aspects of creating a narrative. I talked about this at length in a previous video, but the finale of any story is where we get to see if the narrative sticks its landing. All the conflicts and journeys of a story are really built up around its last moments, and if those moments don't provide a worthy conclusion, it can cause the rest of the story to feel meaningless, because those once interesting plot lines don't lead anywhere. Designing an impactful finale to a story requires a writer to carefully balance all of the pieces of a narrative that have been previously established, and then bring them together into a singular, cohesive moment. And that is exactly what the creative team behind Bojack Horseman endeavored to do in the last 2 episodes, especially the view from halfway down. Every aspect, every detail of the episode was meticulously chosen and curated in order to produce the best possible product. A product focused around a central theme. And instead of me trying to explain the theme of the final episodes, let's use show creator Raphael Bob Waxberg's words instead. He has said, "As the story of the season came together and we realized that Bojack was going to relapse, we knew we could tell a much heavier story and have it be about Bojack coming to terms with his own mortality. We could actually talk about death in a very serious way." The final 2 episodes of Bojack Horseman had a theme centered around death and mortality. They interacted with what it means to face death, what it means to invite death upon oneself, and what it means to want to keep living. The theme of the finale was dark and heavy, but it was one that the Bojack Horseman show had been constructed to handle. And that construction was due in large part to how the show manages themes in writing. Way back in my first ever Bojack Horseman video, I talked about French philosopher and narrative theorist Roland Barthes, and his idea on readerly text and writerly text, both of which are concerned with themes. Now, before you go and think that the term text doesn't apply to this animated TV show, text can simply be understood as a fiction or narrative. So, a readerly text makes no requirements of the reader or audience to produce their own interpretation of the theme. The work explains itself and gives the answers to its own questions. A writerly text, on the other hand, is a narrative with a theme that has no definitive answers to its questions. A writerly text must be digested and discussed and thought about, meaning that each person who interacts with it might come away with their own interpretation. The audience or reader becomes a writer for the text because of the narrative ambiguity. The view from halfway down makes use of both of these thematic styles. The readerly approach comes through when the episode delivers definitive answers to the mysteries of what is happening.
Has anyone ever come back from this place?
BJ, there is no place. It's just your brain going through what it feels like it has to go through.
The audience is made certain about where Bojack is and why everything is occurring.
You didn't pick up.
Right.
It went to voicemail.
Yeah.
And then I went back in the pool.
No interpretation is needed on our part. But the allure and genius of the episode comes from its execution of the writerly position. Many details of the view from halfway down are unclear and require the audience to interpret their meaning. And through our work to decipher what the creators meant, we appreciate the thematic details more because we recognize they were created well enough to not need to be stated blatantly. Zach Braff served each of the party guests their last meal because he died as a meal for party guests.
Tonight, we dine on Zach Braff.
Herb was the only person not to get a drink with his last meal because he spent the final days of his life being hydrated by an IV due to his cancer. The black tar that consumes Bojack seems to be in direct relation to this earlier line.
Hollywood's a real pretty town that's smack on top of all that black tar. By the time you realize you're sinking, it's too late.
Bojack's drowning in the pool was referenced in a multitude of ways, ranging from the painting that he had earlier in the season, to the intro to the show, to this line that he said in Downer Endings.
And when I get too old to take care of myself, I go for one last swim. I know I can't make it back to shore. I'm too weak, too tired. So I just let the water take me under.
And of course, there are a dozen other details and interpretations that I didn't mention, and none of them are definitively true or backed up by the creators. But that is kind of the point. Bojack Horseman isn't a cut and dry show. The reason that it's so special is that it can mean different things to different people. Every person that watches Bojack Horseman, especially the last 2 episodes, will have a personal connection to it because they can create a valid interpretation that is unique to them. This aspect of being able to use the narrative ambiguity to come to personal conclusions was actually extremely important in pinning down my own feelings about the show and its finale. Let me explain. When I first watched the last 2 episodes, I wasn't particularly pleased. I was enthralled with the view from halfway down and the possible death of Bojack, but then found myself feeling a little cheated when the option of Bojack's death was disregarded in the opening moments of the following episode. Seeing Bojack hit rock bottom and almost kill himself in a pool, I thought that the final episode was going to take a long, hard look at the consequences of his actions. Instead, he spends the majority of the episode at a wedding celebration, and while it was cool to see him make amends with the other characters, I remember sitting in front of my TV as the final credits rolled thinking, well, I guess that was decent. Something in my gut just wanted more from the ending of the show. And so, like any millennial starving for validation, I went to Reddit to commiserate with all the other fans. And it was there that I found a prevailing interpretation of the show that was much different than mine. Many of the fans believed that Bojack did die in the view from halfway down, and that the last episode was just his mind coping with death, seeing what it wanted to see in the afterlife. And I gotta tell you, I hated this interpretation. To me, if this outlook of the show's finale were true, it would mean that the show's theme and message was that Bojack lost control, relapsed, broke into a family's home, killed himself, and then was given emotional closure in the afterlife with all his closest friends. That would be a terrible message to give to people that struggle with addiction or suicide, because it basically tells them that their actions in life amount to nothing because death will give you personal peace. Not to mention that it sucks on a narrative level because it rewards Bojack for failing to accomplish his goal. Needless to say, I was very dissatisfied. But then, my brilliant video editor and roommate Max, the magician behind all of my channel's videos, offered me one more interpretation for the ending, one that I could actually get behind. At the end of episode 15, there is a sound of a heart monitor flatlining, obviously signaling a death, and from the context, most likely Bojack's. In the opening moments of episode 16, we see Bojack and Diane, and then a heart monitor flatline again. This is the same position the characters are in at the end of the episode 2, which means that the flatline also occurs at the end of episode 16. Piecing all these visual and audio clues together,
my day was good.
my roommate came to the conclusion that Bojack, in episode 16, hadn't survived the pool or died in it, but that Bojack was halfway down. The events that we see in the final episode, the year of prison and the Hollywood sign and the wedding celebration, those are all Bojack going through the exact same experience that Secretariat described, but instead of in a poem, we see it firsthand. With this interpretation, Bojack isn't getting validation in real life or closure in death. He chose to go back in the pool knowing that he wouldn't be able to get out by himself, just like how Secretariat jumped off the bridge. and Bojack is now seeing what his life could have been like if he had just kept living. Everything he sees in episode 16 is his view from halfway down. This one little change in mindset about episode 16, of it being before the death of Bojack but after his getting back in the pool, makes the final 22 minutes of the show a message about how death is never the answer, and it comes from a person who is facing death because of his own actions. That is much more powerful of a message than Bojack simply overcoming his problems, because it's jarringly real. Not everyone surmounts their personal issues. Some people really are pushed to the edge and don't come back. A story about rising above addiction and depression and toxic behavior is great, don't get me wrong, but a story about a person who succumbed to all those things and then realized that death wasn't the answer is so much better in my opinion. And my newfound appreciation for the show's finale is only possible because the show's details were meticulously designed so that different interpretations could be valid. I'm still trying to figure out the meaning behind certain aspects of the show, like why there was a bird flying around in the house, or why Sarah Lynn changed ages throughout the episode. But there's a certain kind of beauty in not understanding them. Seeing all the tiny nuances of the final 2 episodes, the love and time and care that went into every decision, the specificity of every single word and sentence that contributed to the theme, all these aspects come together to help me appreciate even things I don't get. The last season of Bojack Horseman should be an example to all writers who are designing endings. It was a creative labor of love, one that had no room for anything but the most precisely chosen storylines and details to create its writerly ambiguous feel. Except that really isn't true. When designing the finale, show creator Raphael Bob Waxberg was kind of just winging it. Okay, winging it might not be the best way to describe it, but he was definitely not allowing himself to be tied down by any strict narrative do's and don'ts. In fact, Waxberg has admitted that the entirety of The View from Halfway Down, the highest rated episode of the show mind you, literally only came about because he wanted to complete an alphabet challenge. Once again, let me explain. Going into season 6, the only remaining letters that the show had not used to start episode titles were G, K, N, Q, X, and V. Waxberg recognized this and took it upon himself to make sure that the final season of Bojack Horseman would make use of all of these letters to start an episode. And no, before you slap on your tinfoil, there was no great hidden narrative reason behind using all 26 letters. Waxberg is just a weird, spontaneous dude who made an arbitrary challenge for himself for fun. That's it. And he was able to beat his own challenge. G was used for good damage. K was used for the kidney stays in the picture. N was used for the new client. Q was used for a quick one while he was away. And X was used for Xerox of a Xerox. And sure, yes, he did cheat a little bit by ignoring the and a in front of some of these episodes, but cut the dude some slack. Anyway, as the storyboarding for season 6 was coming to a close, there was still one letter missing that had gone unused to start an episode title. V. Well, when they were going through the events of what was slated to happen in the final episodes, one of the characters was going to read a poem. Waxberg had the idea to name the poem The View from Halfway Down, because it started with the letter V. Here is Waxberg's quote about it. So when we thought about what poem was going to be read in the episode, I mentioned to Allison that it should be called The View from Halfway Down, which became the idea for how we thought about the episode. What it means to have a view from halfway down and how your perspective changes. All because I wanted to use the letter V. So yes, you heard that correctly. Bojack Horseman's penultimate episode and finale were conceived because of a random alphabet game that a silly 35-year-old forced himself to play while writing one of the most anticipated storylines in animated television history. And as a professional editor, I find that so freaking beautiful. Raphael Bob Waxberg, as a writer, was just having fun in the process of writing. Across my journey of writing 5 books, all the outlining and world building and intricate composition, I have found that my best ideas were always unplanned. Being in the moment of writing, experimenting with things outside of my established framework and pathway gave me the coolest twists and turns in my narratives. As much as I talk about the structure and guidelines and formatting of traditional writing, I always constantly go back to the idea that creative writing is a subjective process that, at its core, is meant to express yourself. Never be afraid to be weird or out there in your writing. Sure, there is a lot of unpolished crap that will come along with that process, but every once in a while, you'll get a real gem that you weren't even expecting. This is exactly what happened with Bojack's final season. Waxberg has said, "There are people who work on the show who have asked me if the final episode is real and if he died, which is not necessarily an ambiguity I was thinking about when we were writing it. But people are going to interpret it the way they are going to interpret it. If that's what your takeaway is, well, alright. What does that mean for you?" I'll be honest, when I read that for the first time, my mind was kind of blown. Here I was looking at heart monitor readings and stitching together episodes to decipher the ambiguous message of the show, when that ambiguity was never even intended. My favorite view of the show was that Bojack got in the pool, experienced his view from halfway down, and then died after. But Waxberg has been pretty explicit in saying that he never even considered having Bojack die. So the obvious question becomes, does my interpretation become invalid because the creator did not intend it? Is the show worse because the ending I like best wasn't actually planned? I truly believe the emphatic answer to those questions is no. Raphael Bob Waxberg and the creative team weren't trying to give definitive answers to these questions about death and perspective. There is no wrong interpretation of Bojack's ending because there is no objectively right answer either. The show and its finale were much more about presenting a viewpoint and sparking a conversation so that attention would be paid to these topics. Listen to Waxberg talk about it.
You know, we try not to be too prescriptive with the show. Like, I don't necessarily think I know all the answers, but these are areas I'm interested in exploring and talking about and trying to find solutions to. And I don't know if we, as an industry or a society or as individuals, have found satisfying answers to these questions. And that's one of the reasons I think they're interesting to write about.
I came away from 6 years of the Bojack Horseman show being touched in a way that the creators probably never intended, but that doesn't diminish my experience. Raphael Bob Waxberg wasn't looking to make an ambiguous narrative about the panorama of your life that you see at death's door. But because of the careful design of Bojack's journey over so many great seasons, that's just the luck of what happened. And that brings us back to the quote I introduced at the beginning. Luck is the residue of design. Bojack Horseman was so expertly designed over its 5 previous seasons that good luck was bound to occur in the 6th. Branch Rickey's quote is a perfect mantra for anyone writing endings. Your job as a writer isn't to plan out every little detail and nugget of information so that you become rigid in your craft. Yes, you do need to design a stable basis for your narrative and the theme that you want to interact with. But that design needs to leave room for flexibility and luck and the unplanned. Creative writing is about keeping an open mind to new possibilities and experiences, no matter where you are in your journey of writing. Really, that is the message behind the last 2 episodes of Bojack. No matter where you may be or how deep you are into something, there is always an opportunity to change. And I think that is the best message the show could ever end on. Thank you guys for watching all the way to the end. If you did happen to come away from this video with more knowledge than when you came in, check out our sponsor, Skillshare. No matter where you are in your journey of being a writer, they have something for you. One of the lessons that I wish I had seen when I was writing my first book was 6 steps to creating successful writing habits. Writing is definitely more of a marathon than a sprint, and cultivating the right mindset to continue for months instead of just hours is crucial to have. And if you're looking for courses that really dive into the meat and potatoes of writing, you're in luck, because Skillshare has content on narrative conflict, character creation, and even poetry. The best part is, Skillshare is giving away a free 2-month unlimited access trial to my subscribers who click the link in the description. And even after that, it'll still be pretty cheap at about $10 a month. If you are someone who wants to improve their craft, join 7 million other creative minds with Skillshare. As always, I had a blast making this video for you guys. If you want to be a total homie, you can support the channel on Patreon. It was a pleasure, and I will talk to you all again soon.